very honored tonight to have a couple of our favorite people gracing us to discuss books and music and life and all sorts of things. But first, I would like to welcome you all to the Chatham Square Library. This is part of the New York Public Library system. I'm Sean Ferguson. I'm the library manager here. And welcome to Asian American Authors in Conversation. We've been doing this series for a few years now. We've had both of our authors here before, so it's with great pleasure to bring them back because we know it's going to be a good show. Thank you all for squeezing in and being kind to your neighbors. And if it gets a little cooler in here, we can shut the windows a little bit. But I think we'll be okay because this show's going to be hot. Everybody? Alvin Eng.
For tonight, this is a presentation with the great NYPL Talking Books Asian American Authors in Conversation series, but also we're proud to be part of the Think Chinatown Arts Festival. And our MC for tonight is the president board, and she is Amy Chin from Think Chinatown.
Well, I see a lot of friends in the audience. Thank you all for coming out. This is our penultimate event of Think Chinatown's Chinatown Arts Festival. This is the 6th year that we've been doing a Chinatown Arts Festival. It started out as Chinatown Arts Week, and now it's grown into the Chinatown Arts Festival. And Alvin Eng has been a performer in at least 3 of them. We counted earlier today. In many different iterations. He did his Emperor of Flushing in a performance in Chinatown one year. And then in 2021, he did a performance that we did in, I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but we call it Chinatown Door Jams. This year we had events across the community, and one of our most recent events, we had a block party on Moscow Street. And it was also celebrating the unveiling of the new street sign for Corky Lee Way. You can scan the QR code on the poster. We also have a few more of these calendars, but again, this is our penultimate event, and there will be one other event. It's an opening of an art show tomorrow we call Moon Square, which is artworks by artists in our community that have created them inside empty moon cake boxes. And we've been doing that a couple of years too. Think Chinatown is an intergenerational nonprofit. We're based here in New York, Chinatown, and we work at the intersection of arts, storytelling, and community engagement. If you want to know a little bit more about Think Chinatown, please visit our website at thinkchinatown.org. We work with so many different people across generations, and I can see a lot of those faces here in the community right now, and it just makes us enormously proud to be able to build those bridges. Now I will introduce our star of the evening, Alvin Eng, who actually requires almost no introduction. I have known Alvin for, I don't want to say how many decades.
20th century.
A little too revealing, but a long time. And I met Alvin actually when he was a publicist for Asian Cinevision. How many of you remember Asian Cinevision? Yes. So we go way back across many different terrains. And also we share, you'll find out, also we'll talk a little bit more about it later, we share a personal history of growing up inside a Chinese laundry in New York City. We've grown from there, both of us. Alvin is not only a native New Yorker, he's a playwright, he's an educator, he's a performer. And his memoir, that the paperback of which we're celebrating today, Our Laundry, Our Town, is wonderful, and You and Me Books is selling copies here today. So it was quite an achievement, and it is a book that really tells a history that I think isn't talked about a lot, and it's a very unique journey. And you know, growing up in a Chinese laundry, that used to be the really typical upbringing for a Chinese American kid. And it actually is a childhood that doesn't really exist so much anymore. But Alvin and I were talking the other day about it, about how it exists, but it exists in other forms. So growing up in the back of a bodega, or growing, you know, in the back of a dry cleaner. So whatever your family business is, it is a similar experience. The book was published by Fordham University Press. Hardcover had come out in May of 2022. Now we have the paperback, for those of you who wouldn't spring for the hardcover. The memoir has been covered by the New York Times, NPR, WNYC, and others. You know, not only has he written this book, but Alvin is a playwright. He wrote many plays. Three Trees was his first portrait play series, historical dramas about artists, and that was published by No Passport Press. And he's currently developing a solo acoustic punk raconteur, work in progress. It's called Here Comes Johnny Yen Again. Subtitle, or How I Kicked Punk. And this is a work that will explore the impact of opium and the opium wars on the Chinese diaspora, as well as New York City's punk counterculture through dual prisms of William S. Riceborough's character Johnny Yen, and then paralleled with Alvin's own grandfather's opium overdose on the streets of New York City's Chinatown. So looking forward to that. Alvin is a very accomplished artist. He has been honored as a Fulbright specialist, and he's also a recipient of Niska and NYPA fellowships, among other things. I will not list all of his awards and accolades because we'd be here all night. His plays have been seen off-Broadway, throughout the US, in Hong Kong, in Guangzhou, China, and now he's going to tell us a little bit more about Our Laundry, Our Town. Thank you. Welcome, Alvin.
Good evening. Hello. Thank you for being here. Obviously, I'm so honored that we could all be here to celebrate the paperback publication. And we're in good company tonight. Three of my favorite organizations in Chinatown and New York City and the world. One more time for the Chatham Square New York Public Library. Think Chinatown. And our favorite bookseller in the universe, Lucy Yu of You and Me Books. Okay, I'm going to read excerpts from two chapters. One takes place in Flushing, and one takes place right across the street at 32 East Broadway. That's where HCB used to be. And, okay, this is from chapter 1. It's called The Urban Oracle Bones of Our Laundry, channeling China's last emperor and rock and roll's first opera. While I've been blessed to have always had a roof over my head and the honor of living with loved ones, when I was growing up, homelessness was more of a spiritual state. A child's longing to belong is one of the most powerful forces and relentless muses on earth. In every culture, belonging has many different nuances of meaning and resonance. What and who exactly constitutes that destination of belonging, that changes with every age and in childhood with every grade. What never seems to change is the feeling that we never quite arrive, and when or if we do, it only lasts for a fleeting time and was never quite what we expected. These memoir portraits are an attempt to decode and process the urban oracle bones from growing up as the youngest of 5 children in an immigrant Chinese family that ran a hand laundry. Our family was born of an arranged marriage, and our laundry was in the Flushing, Queens neighborhood of that singular universe that was New York City in the 1970s. Like many children of immigrant or other family origins during that time, I was constantly seeking American frames of reference with which to contextualize my own outsider experiences and sensibilities. Although Flushing became New York City's second Chinatown during the 1980s, aka the People's Republic of Flushing, in the 1960s and 70s, we were one of only a fistful of Chinese families there. The Flushing of my childhood was still basking in the afterglow of the post-World War II suburban baby boom. That boom was celebrated at the 1964-65 World's Fair held in Flushing Meadows Park. And slide number 2, please. And that's me with my family at the 64-65 World's Fair. I'm the youngest one there in the striped shirt. Now that World's Fair was the zenith of the American century, when anything was supposed to be possible. In this euphoric mood, Flushing immigrants were the last wave who gave up everything. They had forsaken their customs, their language. Many would have changed their appearance if they could, just to get a whiff of the American dream. Next slide, please. And that's me with my mother. This is on the cover of the book. I'm 6 years old. Our Fu Jie Chin Chinese hand laundry was a long, narrow, railroad-style store that stretched from a parking lot in the rear to Flushing's bustling Union Street in the front. The back room was the family area. This comprised a kitchen, a dining, and a napping area. This is where we all ate and where the kids did their homework and goofed off between laundry chores. This is the middle room. The middle room was where the ironing and wrapping of laundered garments took place. The middle room had long, rectangular padded tables for ironing and sorting laundry, and then large light metal sewing stations. This was the largest room of our laundry, and primarily the court of our mother, Toilan Chin Eng, or the Empress Mother, as she is anointed in this memoir. In this middle room, the Empress Mother took her breaks, read the Chinese newspapers, and listened to her beloved Cantonese opera. The front rooms were our family, or what I refer to as the Eng dynasty. This is where we interacted with the world. After entering through the front door, customers stood behind a wall-to-wall wooden counter. Next slide, please. Thank you. And here I'm sitting with my dad, 6 years old. I'm always looking for something to eat. I got a plate in my hand. And we have our backs to the counter, because that front counter, the front counter is where the customers dropped off their dirty laundry, then later picked up and paid for the cleaned, wrapped laundry a few days later. This was the smallest room, and primarily the court of my dad, King Hua Eng. And between greeting customers and tending to all matters of laundry business, this is where he listened to WCBS News Radio 880 on his small transistor radio, and this is where he read the daily news. Both the middle and front rooms, the walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves of rows and rows of brown paper wrap packages of the customers' clean laundry. Each brown paper package had a different colored ticket on the outside, and in my child's mind's eye, each brightly colored ticket was a window into a different apartment of the big brown building that was comprised by all of the wrapped laundry packages. The clean garments wrapped up in these packages, they were the silent witnesses to the events and rituals that made up the lives of their wearers. The wearers all belonged to families in which both parents did not work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week in a laundry. Instead, the fathers worked only 5 days a week, 9 to 5 in an office. The mother was a full-time stay-at-home mom, and both of them spoke perfect English. I called this building the Great Wall of Laundry. And because Dad spoke English and the Empress Mother did not, Dad's station in our laundry and in our family was on the front line. Dad's was usually the first face that customers would see as they entered our laundry, and always dressed in his white shirt, white button-down shirt with a pen holder on the left front shirt pocket. He sat behind that front counter like a target. And he went eyeball to eyeball with each and every customer, hustler, and angry war veteran that walked through the door. And people would routinely take shots like, "Can you speak Englishy, Charlie? No ticky, no shirty." Dad would just grow sullen and speechless and take one for the family. The Empress Mother, however, would respond to these taunts with a lusty, "Aya, mo young bakui, kasi and ben." Useless white devil ghosts. You can step on shit and it will not bend. This as translated from the delicate Toisan dialect of Cantonese, Chinese. Surely one of the overlooked Romance languages of the 20th century. Now the Empress Mother station in our laundry, it abutted the wall that divided the public business space from the private family space. And because the Empress Mother got to stay behind my dad, she got to keep her fiery Toisan cord together. And from the late 19th to the late 20th century, 80% of Chinese immigrants to America emigrated from Toisan. During this time, Toisan was the dominant dialect and aesthetic of the Chinatowns and working class Chinese communities throughout North America. So in this light and in that era, the Toisanese were very much like the Sicilians. In North America, Toisan towns, just like Sicilian enclaves, we operated under our own rules, regulations, and justice systems. And when words, deeds, and laws failed us, there was always the meat cleaver. While I never saw my parents pull actual meat cleavers on each other, I did witness their weekly, sometimes daily tremors of psychological warfare grow more viciously antagonistic week after week. To escape the oft-times suffocating and intimidating environment of our laundry, thankfully my brother Herman and I, we bonded over a joyous world of our own through the power of rock and roll. Next slide, please. And this is me and my brother many years later, and obviously rock and roll became a lifelong bond, but it all started with one album in particular, Al. Everybody in the block is talking about Tommy, raved Herman. The Who are even gonna play the whole thing at Woodstock. We have to get it. But $6 for one album? I asked, now being a seasoned suspicious music consumer at the age of 7. Al, it's a double album, just like the White Album, and it's only on sale at Corvettes. Corvettes! Corvettes is so far away, it's pouring out. Hey, it's 8+ tax at Record Spec or King Carol on Main Street. I don't know, Herm. Al, we gotta do it. The rain's letting up, it'll be worth every cent, I promise. Oh, okay. So I reluctantly handed over my hard-saved laundry salary allowance, putting our combined kitty over the magic $7 threshold. There was tax to pay on vinyl records, you see. And off we rode, on our Schwinn banana seat bikes, through 3 neighborhoods and over 10 miles round trip, through a lighter but still steady rain to EJ Corvettes in Douglaston, the only store in Northeast Queens where we could afford to buy the Who's Tommy. And Herman was right. It was worth every penny. Herman and I started quoting the lyrics from Tommy to each other to the point where those lyrics became virtually our entire vocabulary. We wandered on Flushing and on Sundays right around here in Manhattan's Chinatown with our parents, and we imagined connections between our two most familiar stomping grounds and the Who's native neighborhood of Shepherd's Bush. After witnessing some heinous screaming match between Dad and the Empress Mother in our laundry or in Chinatown, Herman and I would instinctively look at each other and say, "How do you think he does it? I don't know." And by mimicking the pinball wizard vocal interplay, we found a favorite new pastime. But most importantly, we also found a way to deflect some of life's unpleasantries through the mighty shield of rock and roll. So when we bought Tommy, I was 7 and Herman was 12, so we could hang, but of course a few years later he became a teenager and spent very little time in the laundry or at home. So I spent most of my days with the Empress Mother, Dad, and Tommy. The Empress Mother encouraged my drawing and let me do this alongside her break station in the large middle room of our laundry. Repeatedly listening to Tommy, while ultimately gazing at the album's cover artwork and drawing my own little pictures, completely captivated my 9-year-old psyche and mind, deepening the spell with each plane. But inevitably, my reverie would be broken by a larger power. The Empress Mother drowning out Tommy with what my 9-year-old self called that shredded pots and pans music, or what the cultured world calls Cantonese opera. So yes, in the early 1970s, the Eng dynasty was probably the only American household in which the kids were pleading with their parents, could please turn that noise down. But in that sacred back room, we're not blasting with shrill morality tales of supernatural Cantonese operas. The Empress Mother would frequently lecture me on the ways of the world beyond my little laundry fiefdom. Mo hong and ong atai, and again. All in the hong and oki, mo hong and ong atai. There's no good people out there. They don't feel for people. All the good people you will ever need are right here at home. There's no good people out there. For the next 30 years, through the sweeping worldwide changes of the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, within the walls of the Eng dynasty, the song remained the same for the dominating Empress Mother and her obliging last emperor of a youngest son. We could have lived in the 1870s, or the 1780s, or the 1690s. Okay. The next chapter, we're going to go back 35 years and right across the street to 32 East Broadway. We're here now in the great 33 East Broadway. And this is a chapter called Trip the Light, Gorgeous Mosaic. Double Happiness, Discovering Playwriting and Activism. In many ways, my first play was born there. Next slide, please. And it features this guy. Yes, this is my late 1980s punk rap character called the Gung Hay Kid. And in the days before Photoshop, this is actually in trying to emulate my Queens hip hop heroes Run DMC. This is actually like something that hangs in a window more. Like they're just paper. So if the wind blew, they'd be like this. So. And so the chapter begins with 2 lyrics from the Gung Hay Kid. I'm going to rap the first one for you, and the second one is actually the Empress Mother on audio tape. So the chapter begins with 2 lyrics, and this is audience participation time. Okay, there's a simple chorus that says, rock me Gung Hay, and if you could clap your hands 3 times, so go, rock me Gung Hay, rock me Gung Hay. We're gonna get known famously. Okay, here we go. Look at that, we're, 2 minutes, we're off book already, here we are. So remember, this is this guy from back in the late 1980s. Lose that shit, this ain't the native land. I'm the Gung Hay Kid, hope you understand. Don't do no Cowtown on the rickshaw, so don't be talking no dragons or the Great Wall. I ain't good in math, I don't know Kung Fu. Did no far Confucius and Fu Manchu, so don't mess with me or call me Bruce Lee. Ain't no one better, the Kid Gung Hay. Rock me Gung Hay, rock me Gung Hay, rock me Gung Hay, rock me Gung Hay. Fever was a lot in this country. Now we're the so-called model minority, which really don't mean shit if you think about it. Plenty still despise our science eyes, so don't overcompensate for your sorry state. You can't keep us in the laundry or the railroad track. Because it takes a nation of billions to hold us people back. 3, 4, rock me Gung Hay, rock me Gung Hay, rock me Gung Hay. Gung Hay Fa Choi! 35 years of cobwebs are coming off now. Next slide, please. And this is actually the late Empress Mother singing. This is also the second verse in this chapter.
Sai khí mùi thì cục khen.
Translation. People's lives are like dreams. Human nature has no taste, like water. People in this world, how long do we have? People's natures are like paper. Every sheet is thin. What we know is strange, because everything is new. These two lyrics bookend my punk rap play with songs, The Gung Hay Kid. Me Gung Hay is the show's finale, and it is an homage, or depending on your perspective, a blatant ripoff of Public Enemy's Fight the Power. People's lives are like dreams. The play's prologue and epilogue is a traditional Cantonese lullaby that the Empress Mother used to sing around our laundry and in both Flushing palaces of the Eng dynasty. These two lyrics also represent the contours of my disposition during the late 1980s, early 1990s multiculturalism movement. In New York City, this era was famously celebrated as the gorgeous Mosaic by our first black mayor, the late Honorable David N. Dinkins. The gorgeous Mosaic era redefined the American frame to which I had been longing to belong my entire life. The number 8 holds special significance for the Chinese. It is a homonym of good fortune and a symbol of good luck and long life. Thus, 1988 portended to be a good year to start new things as well as to renew older ones. Alongside making the transition from working in the music biz to Director of Public Relations for Asian Cinevision right across the street, and I was discovering New York City's Asian American arts and activism world. Along with this discovery, I was looking to rekindle dormant creative pursuits. Next slide, please. And my last forays was playing in teenage punk bands. This is we were the band The Grips, and we were at the bitter end on Bleecker Street. So I was looking to rekindle some of this energy, and I was lucky. One of my first tasks and public events at ACV was to assist writer-performance artist Jessica Hagedorn, yes, the great Jessica Hagedorn, and critic curator Darryl Chin with their acclaimed literary series, Talk and Cheap. The series' first guest of 1988 was playwright David Henry Wong. He was to read from M. Butterfly, the play that would make his Broadway debut the following month. The ACV Talk and Cheap reading was the first New York City public reading from M. Butterfly. As Wong read startling passages from his play, I would soon redefine the parameters of artistic explorations of East-West socio-sexual political relations. I was buzzing with a feeling I had not known since first hearing The Who's Tommy, or David Johansen's Funky But Chic. Yes, as culturally sheltered as it may sound, it wasn't until the age of 25 that something besides rock and roll had as much of a primal and intellectual impact. David Henry Wong's powerful play proved that there was a place for our visions and voices on the biggest theatrical stage in New York City and the world. M. Butterfly would go on to have a celebrated extended run on Broadway, winning 2 1988 Tony Awards, one for its star, B.D. Wong, and one for Best Play for David Henry Wong. And since 1988, not one Asian American playwright has won the Tony Award. I'll just leave that right there. The morning after that provocative public first reading from M. Butterfly, I decided to apply for a playwriting workshop instead of the screenwriting workshop I had been strongly considering at the Writer's Voice. A few days after seeing one of the first M. Butterfly preview performances, I was accepted into the playwriting workshop at the Writer's Voice. A few weeks later, still buoyed by the zeitgeist confirmation of M. Butterfly's fast becoming a barrier-breaking, history-making Broadway hit, I practically floated up the stairs, through the swimming pool chlorinated air of the 63rd Street Y to my first playwriting class at the Writer's Voice. It was a magical time for a Chinese American to begin his journey as a playwright. Next slide, please. And this is from 1994. In 1994, The Gung Hay Kid became the first play or full-length performance piece written by an Asian American to be presented at the historic Nuyorican Poets Cafe. For the Nuyorican Poets Cafe production of The Gung Hay Kid, I also had the added bonus of being the rhythm guitarist in the production's punk rap pit band. Before each performance, director Rome Neal would gather us in a circle And in that circle, we would share what we were grateful for, what we were troubled by that night. On opening night, I became very emotional in the circle. I started crying. I so lamented the fact that my dad would not physically be there for this or any of my premieres. The tears continued to flow as I shared how grateful I was for everyone in the room, and especially downstairs for my mother and my brother who were downstairs. During the pre-show curtain speech, Rome and New Week Post Cafe founder Miguel Algarin, they graciously introduced the Empress Mother, and she took this flashy bow for the ages. I guess I had to get the showbiz gene from somewhere. Every night, the prologue and epilogue ended with a recording we just heard, of the Empress Mother singing People's Lives Like Dreams. On opening night, the voice of the play's prologue and epilogue, as well as the embodiment of his conscience and soul, was seated at one of the cafe's front tables. Throughout the show, I kept watching the Empress Mother and Herman. I smiled as Herman would visually react to the show's laughs, cries, and everything in between. But I was even more moved by the Empress Mother's static facial expression. While she was clearly proud to be there, and I couldn't have been prouder to have her there, it was a heartbreaking visual and visceral revelation of the language barrier between us all these years. As mother and youngest son, we shared so much. Yet now as a writer, I could never fully share with her what was most important and vital to me. I regretted even more that I could not fluently speak, let alone write, any dialect of Chinese. In the end, the gorgeous Mosaic was the most healing, empowering, and exhilarating period. It made most of us accept and process a more nuanced and complex portrait of who we were as a city, a society, and a world. Yet inevitably, every answer of affirmation that the gorgeous Mosaic offered posed even more complicated questions. The underside of the gorgeous Mosaic era was the fight and resiliency required to celebrate and represent our unique identities, communities, and cultures. Scenes and worlds often change in a whim. Other times, it takes an epidemic and everything in between. Each and every performance and work of art is a statement and celebration of being. All representation is personal and political. We must seize the moment and realize it while we can. Thank you for listening. We have some great conversation partners for you now. We're going to bring up to the stage the great author of the Jack Yu crime novel series, and now an executive producer of films too. Please welcome Chinatown's favorite literary son, Henry Chang.
Man, that's a hard act to follow. Man, so the average reader is not going to know what goes on from the manuscript till it gets to be a book, right? So many of the conversations we had over the years, maybe you can take us through it and tell us about some of the tribulations that it took for this to get here.
Absolutely.
And then now to paperback.
And Henry was good enough. We've been on this journey together a long time. You first looked at the monologues in this back in 2006, I believe, 2006, 2007. So we've been on this journey a long time. So, as you know, let's say the market side, the business side of writing is never an easy one. And I guess way back then, around that time, I had a literary agent for a hot minute, and not much happened there. And then it just took a long time to really keep rewriting it, and focusing it, and just all these different things. And so it took a long time to do this. But sometimes you just follow your passions, like as we were getting all the proper channels of all getting rejected. The catch-22 of getting an agent. I was a produced playwright, but I hadn't been published yet as a writer, so that was a tough thing. And then how this book finally came to be published was just by following your passions. I do a lot of volunteer work with a group called Rise and Resist. I think there's some Rise and Resistors here. at a protest, an abolish ICE protest, and ICE is an Immigration Customs Enforcement. It was a pro-immigrants' rights rally, and the person next to me just happened to be the editorial director of Fordham University Press, and I didn't know that at the time. We just got to talking, and I told him, I'm primarily a playwright. I know the publishing world has changed so drastically. By this point, this is about 2019 or so, and I said, I know the world has changed so differently. Can I just seek your advice on how to even approach a publisher? And he said, can I see the manuscript? And I know, as implausible as it sounds, he liked it. He couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. So after sometimes we get like sadly, there's not everyone, but at least in my case, there were years of rejection of this, so fighting that. So and then he liked it, and here we are. They brought it out. So you just never know. Just follow your passions.
So, in your case, you were lucky, right? You were able to get published without an agent, right? And I can empathize with that, because in the beginning the same thing happened. You can't get an agent, nobody wants you, you got no track record, and then serendipity, you get published.
Absolutely. And same with you. With you two, didn't have a traditional agent, right? And then things came together for your publications.
No, when I acquired the agents that I had that got me published, I acquired them just by luck. I ran into an old friend who introduced me to them, and gradually that's how it happened. But I'm not going to recommend serendipity for you, but doesn't hurt.
True. But
now, you remember early on, we were going over your stories and you wanted some critical input, and I will tell you that we've got a lot of disparate stories. They go in all different directions. So tell us how you were able to wrangle all those. I mean, just from reading the book, you have so many different things that you've done, from rock and roll to the laundry. How do you wrangle all those stories together to get it so that Fordham University would put it into a book?
It took a long time. The early draft of this could have been called Everything Everywhere All at Once. But there's a big difference there. They're a laundromat family. We were a laundry family. Right? People grow up in laundry milk. Those are galaxies of differences, right? So, yes. And when it was, I guess, like with anything, of course, it's everyone has their own thresholds for self-expression and self-indulgence. So, and you don't want to cross those lines. And I always felt that at first, you never want a memoir or anything that's really just, I did this, I did that. And you're always looking for a larger context, because you want to talk about your world, but you want to talk about the world. Always try to balance that too. So it took a long time to really get that down. And the title, Our Laundry, Our Town, because our laundry is growing up in that, and then our town was going from the rock and roll world into the theatrical world, where just a small thing where we always, I think everyone in the arts, no matter where we come from, we feel like outsiders. That's why we go to the arts, because we feel like all the outsiders finally fit in somewhere in the arts world. And yet discovering, there's actually a lot of Chinese roots to Thornton Wilder's play Our Town, because Thornton Wilder's father was the Consul General to Hong Kong and Shanghai. So growing up, he was exposed to a lot of Cantonese opera. And there's a quick collection of letters between Gertrude Stein and Thornton Wilder. I love that she calls him Thorny as only she can. Dear Thorny. But he writes back, my next play, I'm stealing all the ideas from the making of Americans, along with the concept of the property manager from Peking opera. So I was like, the stage manager of Our Town is derived from Peking opera, and that led me to really think about the whole. And then Our Town became very influential on me, and my wife Wendy was here. Wendy was working the We co-directed a workshop where we got the Chinese students at City University of Hong Kong to really write and perform their own plays in response. And as part of that, and I guess it's a memoir, so I can give away some of the ending. And I got to, while we were in residence in Hong Kong, I got to perform the last Emperor of Flushing in China. So that put things full circle. So that really gave this real cap. So I think, I guess, and that workshop hadn't happened yet by the time we were first looking at things. Sometimes life will give you the ending of the book. Yes,
Right, that's why early on when I thought, what is this? Is this a memoir? But I'm not sure because, you know, your whole trip has not ended yet. And it was like you were looking back, but you were looking forward. You hadn't even been to China yet.
Right, yes. And so a lot changed. So hopefully life will give us the input for the next chapters.
Tell us a little bit about your book tour, your first book, the hardcover.
Oh yeah, we went to a lot of different places, but primarily in the East Coast. We're hoping to get to the West Coast this time, and we did a number of things. I was here last year too as part of that, and we started with we had a dual launch of the hardcover. They're happy we have a representative here. It was the online launch was at the great CUNY ARI, the Asian American Research Institute, and Anthony Wong is here. And he curated the Great Friday Lecture Series, so it was a kickoff Friday there. And then also on the other side was the great group called City Lore. We had a launch there, so we did a number of readings there at the libraries and things. So we just take it everywhere we can between different libraries, different schools and things too. And I was lucky where I teach a few places. I teach at Marymount. We have some Marymount students here, and I teach at the MCC, and the schools were good enough to have us too. So we've been looking to reach a combination of people, and also a lot of great bookshops too. It's great. There's support indie bookshops, and of course, Mr. Lewis would love to have me there, and we're going to be back together again in November. Easy date to remember, 11/11. So the combination of indie bookstores, schools, and then Asian American groups, and also, of course, the New York Public Libraries. We were here, so all these things.
So, let's talk about your paperback now.
Okay.
All right, so are you anticipating going on as many stops on the paperback tour now?
Absolutely. We hope to bring up those frequent flyer miles. We're going to do things outside of the tri-state area. We're talking to, we're very lucky. We've been lucky like through the theater arts too. Like our friend Christina Wong has been a very big advocate of this. So we're going to try and do something on the West Coast with that. So and take it all over. And so we're looking to get out of the tri-state area, what Amtrak would call the Northeast Corridor. So we're trying to get out of that.
Okay, so what do you have lined up for us next? What is, like at the risk of, do you have something else coming up? This is what you're involved with right now, but do you have any other plans for anything beyond this?
Yes, this place started, like the foundation for this narrative were two solo performance plays. One was The Last Emperor of Flushing, and I was good enough to, thankfully, able to perform the historic 70 Mulberry Street at the 2019 Chinatown Arts Festival in Chinatown, so that was a blessing, so that was that. And the other piece was called The Flushing Cycle, like for people in the theater world, like remember back when there was a thing called the Kentucky Cycle, like 3 nights there? I just thought, as the Brits would say, I thought it would take the piss and do something called The Flushing Cycle. It was very short. And those two pieces became the narrative. And now, as Amy mentioned, I'm working on a solo acoustic punk rock and tour work called Here Comes Johnny Yen Again, or How I Kicked Punk. And that kind of compares and contrasts. Like growing up in the heroin chic 70s, I never thought, oh my God, the impact of heroin on a deeper level, like through the opium wars. And of course, like everyone, I first learned of Johnny Yen from the great Iggy Pop David Bowie song, Lust for Life. That's why I started hearing Johnny Yen. So we're looking, that's a series of songs and monologues, and hopefully that will be another book too, you're right, maybe not a memoir, just call it a non-fiction book.
I can't wait for Johnny Yen.
Oh, thank you so much, thank you.
You and I had this conversation through the years, and looking at the situation now, we've asked, what do you think is the state of Asian American writers now, today?
I think we're in a good place. There's so many more Asian American, I'm happy to say there's so many more Asian American authors than ever before, so I'm really happy. And also that brings up the big thing where, literary freedom, artistic freedom. It's always as we navigate, we're proud to tell our stories and do that. But I also feel that especially more in the theater too. Like I don't told you should only write plays about Asian American characters. So it's a tricky thing of how we navigate that. But I think it's a very exciting time now, and I think you feel it's a very exciting time.
That sounds good to me. Is Ava Chin here tonight? Ava Chin's got a new book out there. Some of you might have heard about it. It's called Mott Street. Curtis Chin, who made the film Dear Koki, he's got a new book out.
Absolutely. And Curtis Chin, an unknown fact, he's one of the founders of the Asian American Writers Workshop. So he's got a memoir out, and also they've been great. Also, there's been some great books that really bend the styles too, like Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu. That was quite a great.
And of course, there's this.
Right, and there's the great Jack Yu detective series by Henry Chang too.
I think any year where you get the Ed wins the Pulitzer and the Edgar in the same year, I think it's a good year for Asian American writers.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And all you have to do is go over to You and Me Books and just look at the lineup and see how many Asian American authors there are.
And then now at the marketplace, which is essentially under Essex Market, so go on over there. It's a great one. Yes, and then you'll find that whole world. And we couldn't exist without you. We need the bookstores and everything.
I couldn't exist without you.
Here we are. Yes. No, so I think it's a very exciting time now too, and I just love that. And I love that I also think we're also part of the Asian American writers, but also I love that we're all part of the community of New York City writers too. So I think that's a very important thing.
Okay. What do you have to say to the audience in closing?
Oh wow! Well, we're just getting started too. Oh no, but also really just there'll be more because we're going to talk more. And we have a secret surprise. So we're going to play a song inspired by one of Henry's novels too. And when we do that, it's going to give new definition to a full service library. So we'll tell you about that in a minute too. But next is before we start February 2. Now we're going to welcome back my kindred spirit of growing up in a laundry. Let's welcome back Amy Chin.
Wait, I'm still here.
Yeah, you're
You're
still
still here.
Are you still here?
Wow. Well, I think we're going to take this conversation to a slightly different place. Having read Our Laundry, Our Town, it just resonated with me because we had such a similar upbringing. And a lot of people today don't realize that Flushing wasn't always Asian. And so I wanted to ask you, Alvin, to describe the Flushing of your childhood in the Chinese laundry and what was surrounding it in the streets around you, because it's very different than what we have today, where it's almost all Asian.
Right. It was primarily Italian and Jewish, in Flushing at that time. I was in the 8th grade. Every Saturday, I'd be dancing the horror at a friend's bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. It was a very different world then. It was a very, very different world then. So there was that. People can't believe it now, because if you know Flushing, like a lot of the signages are in different Asian languages, and people can't believe we were one of the few Asian families there. You grew up in the Flushing area too, so yes. Yeah.
Nearby, but I used to take the 7.
Right.
And meet my boyfriend at Flushing.
Ah.
So, yeah, I can remember that in the late 60s.
Right. God bless the 7 train. So it was a very different world then. And I always say, like, in writing this memoir, I realized it's never too early to begin, because we all become period pieces quicker than we think. Pretty soon we become period piece. So I said, okay, it's good to capture that. And so that was a very different world then. And laundries, they're not around that much anymore. Chinese laundries, they're very few.
Yeah, no, I grew up in a Chinese laundry in the Bronx, and next door was the Italian shoemaker, and then there was the Jewish deli, and then there was the Italian bakery on the corner, and it was a very mixed neighborhood. There was the Irish bar across the street, and You know, we were the Chinese, so we represented all of China. Whatever we said was true. Did you feel the same way, Alvin?
Yeah, sometimes we would do that too, and I think there's a chapter called Everybody Was Kung Fu Fighting or Faking It, and I think I was more in the latter category. And then after a while, it was funny. It's funny looking back now. We didn't, as a 7-year-old, I wasn't aware of how problematic it was to have David Carradine playing the Shaolin. And also, of course, I didn't know at that time that they passed over Bruce Lee to play that role too. I didn't know that. Of course, news traveled slowly to Flushing back then. So, but that shows how starved we were, just to see a semblance of an Asian character who was kicking butt. I was like, this is amazing. So that was.
I have to say about the laundry experience. My extended family had experience in the laundry business as well. Didn't like it. Moved on to the grocery store after that. And then I look back on all the Chinatown people, friends that I've had who had their families own the laundries. They didn't like it. It wasn't something they wanted to do, but that was all they could do.
Absolutely. And did this come up? A lot of people say it's a common, immigrant trope where, at least in my family, it never came up. Do you want to carry on the family business? It never came up. Did that ever come up in your family?
No, it actually didn't. I think our experience was a little bit unique because my father had like 2 or 3 laundries at some point, and I was told as a child that his laundry was one of the top 1 or 2 grossing laundries in the Bronx, and it had to do with it being next to a huge development where there were a lot of people and they weren't allowed to have like washer dryers and things like that. So I think it was a slightly different experience. But yeah, I don't. There still wasn't a sense that we wanted the next generation to do the same thing. But when my father passed away in 1988, it was interesting because my mother was looking for somebody else to take over the business, so it wasn't just going to shut down. And this elderly Chinese man took over the business, and he said to my mother, "I am going to bring it back to its former glory." And he was this elderly man who had worked in laundries his entire life. It was really quite stunning to hear him say that. And you know what? I don't know if you felt this, Alvin, but I love your description in the book of the layout of the laundry, because ours was the same. When I was 4 or 5, we bought a house, so we didn't really live in the back of the laundry anymore. But I always felt that when we were in the laundry, that we were on display. And I always wonder if that's what, if you felt that same way, that people would come. In your excerpt, you talked about them running by and yelling things and stuff like that. Do you think that's the root of you wanting to become a performer?
Oh, that was too tough an audience. I wouldn't want to be performing for that audience.
But now you know what to do when people heckle you, right?
Right. I just say, what would Mom say?
I mean, it's very interesting. Henry and Alvin and me. I mean, we come from very working class backgrounds in a sense, right? Henry, you call yourself a son of Chinatown. Yes, right?
Yes.
And I think regardless of what your family background is ethnically, when you come from a working class background and your parents work really hard, I think it's a really tough choice to say, I'm going to go work in the arts. So what gave you the fortitude or the imagination and really the courage to do that? And that's for both of you.
Yeah, thanks. In my case, I just had these stories that needed telling. They were just fighting their way out. Back in the days when we used to hang out, when I was in college, and then when I come back down here to the neighborhood, all night it would be gambling houses and bars and all-night coffee shops and other places of ill repute. And I'd get home at 3 or 4 in the morning, and I'd have all these scribbled papers on table napkins and stuff, and And that eventually became 5 books. So these stories that were just demanding to get out, and they were violent, they were sexual, they were brutal, but this was the gang culture in Chinatown in the 70s.
It's very interesting to hear you say that, Henry, because I told you I had a surprise for you tonight. And
Now I'm worried.
I dug up this guest column for, I think it was maybe in Bridge Magazine or something.
Oh, wow.
It's called Chinatown, Hell on the Golden Mountain, by a young man named Henry Chang.
I was Henri at one time.
That was on the Chinatown left bank.
And then I was told it was pretentious and colonial. So I'm just Henry now.
It was pretentious and colonial, and you still couldn't get an agent?
Well, this Henry Chang, whoever he is, describes himself as a Chinatown brother and is a student at City College in New York City.
We took over that campus in '71. We got Black Studies, Asian Studies. Yeah, we took over the campus.
There's a great film about that now called The 5 Demands. Yes.
That's right. The 5 Demands is about actually the '69 when Black and Puerto Rican students took over City College. And you know, it was...
Oh, you were there too?
No, no.
I heard about it.
But I am on the board of Jezebel Films that produced that film. And what's interesting about it, just to digress a little, the interesting thing about the 5 Demands, it's about the spring of '69 when Black and Puerto Rican students took over the administration building at City College and demanded things like open enrollment and also ethnic studies. And when the producers, the filmmakers were making the film, they asked me to ask around and say, hey, there must have been Asian students there. Can we find an Asian student who was there? And you know, we searched and searched and searched. We actually, in the archives, also found an amazing photograph of students protesting for Asian American studies, and holding one of the end of the poster was, the banner was Paul Gong, and you know, the late Paul Gong. And so we kept asking, and everybody we spoke to pretty much said, no, I wasn't there in the spring of '69, I was there the next semester, or the next year. And it really became apparent to us that it was because of the '69 takeover by Black and Puerto Rican students that then led to Asian American students getting into City College and then demanding Asian American studies. It's pretty amazing. I'm gonna read the whole thing, but I'm gonna read an excerpt by the mysterious Henry Chang. It is the youth here that will change things. Their attempts, in many instances, have been met by the frustrating defiance of their elders, or the tiresome politics of government bureaucracies. Attempts by youth, such as the recent Chinatown Health Fair, are big, small steps. It is a beginning, but it is not nearly enough. But the power to change this environment is not even within the grasp of Chinatown's youth, nor is it in the hands of social service agencies. Only the elders have the power. They can do it, but they don't want to, don't care to. So many young people are trying to change things, but they are impotent. And that's 1971, Henry Chang. So now I want to ask, how do you feel now?
I think we've come a long way. And I just have to think we've lost some good people along the way. I'm not going to name them, but it's been a long struggle, and we've come a long way. I see some gray heads in here, and I think you know what I mean.
But I think thanks to your efforts, it made it easier for for Amy and like people like Amy and myself. And also just a quick, these two folks, they did a lot for Asian American arts and Chinatown arts too. Like they just Henry getting the ball rolling with making it a vibrant literary circle down here again, and then Amy's work with Think Chinatown and before too. So
Thank you.
Well, no, thank you.
I mean, we're always building, and we continue to build, and I think it's really important to know and understand who came before you and what they built that you are building upon.
Right. And I think your generation led the way in that way too. And then like in my situation too, I'm like the spoiled one. I'm the only one of my 5 siblings that lived in a house that was separate from our laundry too. But that was a big house, and luckily there was always a rock band in our garage. And so it was always all around me. And then I guess just a parental fatigue. I think by the time I'm the youngest of 5, they had a girlfriend. They were immigrants. They were undocumented immigrants. So I think when I was a teenager, like I'm going to take the 7 train into to CBGB's and come back at 4 in the morning. Yeah, go ahead, sure, whatever you want. just don't burn the house down. So it was so it wasn't just the year, but also when you were, I think, in your family dynamic. So I'm the youngest of that. That's why it never was a big problem to say that I was going into the arts too. And I happen to you and of course before that she was a wonderful dancer, choreographer too. So, and to go into the arts, did your parents say much about that?
I was telling a story that was really funny because I think sometime when I was looking at colleges, I was really into environmental things, and I told my parents, I'm going to study agricultural sciences. And they said, oh my God, we left that all behind in China, now you're going to go pick up cow manure?
We left China for that.
I ended up not doing that. I ended up studying East Asian studies, and I think that they weren't sure what I was going to do with it, but I had this idea that I'll be able to work and do something. At one point, and I was dancing, and then at one point I became a program specialist for the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs. So kind of giving out grants, reviewing grant proposals and things like that. And when I got the job, I told my dad. And he started telling his friends, Amy got a good government job. And then he would say, it's a little bit like welfare, but instead of giving it to poor people, she gives it to artists. But it really is, I mean, I think younger Asian American artists today kind of deal with that same thing. I think as working class kids, there was a little bit more of a barrier. And I think the immigration generation, like most of us grew up in working class homes. And then the next wave of immigration from Asia was actually students and a more educated class. And so I think that the later generations had more of a financial cushion than we did. I know that, I did all kinds of different jobs. I worked in a Chinese takeout restaurant for, a short time as the hostess. That's what you do. And other things like that. But what are some of the jobs that you had to do before you became such successful writers?
My friend Wick and I used to wait tables in Chinatown at On Love Restaurant. And growing up, my folks had a grocery store in Harlem, Amsterdam, 149th Street. And that was really a strange world, you're like 7, 8 years old, growing up in Harlem.
No, we're all, I worked, before I went back to the arts, I worked in the music business, which was the greatest thing in the world at that point. And then other odd jobs, I worked in an Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips. I worked in record stores, and we did a little everything too, before I found teaching. So.
Yeah, and then when you guys were starting out, I mean, there were very few Asian Americans in the arts. I mean, I think it's amazing in 1988, you were interviewing David Henry Huang, and he's just about to premiere M. Butterfly. And I think most of the Asian American artists around there kind of knew each other because there were so few of us.
It was just magical, like just with serendipity. You just start working right across the street at 32 East Broadway, up those rickety wooden stairs, and people used to go to the old ACB office. And on my first day, I was helping the great Jessica Hagedorn. I was going, oh my God. And I was more of a rock and roll kid. And then when theater wasn't completely on my radar. But when I heard David read from his play, and it's so rare to hear the playwright themselves read from it, but when he read from it, it rocked my world.
Well, yeah.
What else? So before we open it up for a question and audience, we have one more surprise for Henry. So once again, Amy Chin, Henry Chang.
So while Alvin prepares for his big surprise, I'll give you guys a little intro to that. We heard from Sean Ferguson earlier. We know that he is the master of the domain here at the Chatham Square Library. But few people realize that he is also a rocking guitarist. And what Alvin and Sean have planned for us is a new rendition of a song called Chinatown Beat, which is based on Henry Chang's book of the same name. And this was last performed in 2021 at the Chinatown Arts Festival, and it was performed in a program we called Chinatown Door Jams. And the origin of Chinatown Door Jams was that at 21 Hell Street, the First Chinese Baptist Church, historic building, their door was actually jammed. And the marvelous Mrs. Maisel came and filmed some segments in Chinatown, and they used the facade of the church as the supposed entrance to a jazz club. And in the process of doing that, they unjammed that door. So it being the pandemic, we said, well, let's do the performances outdoors. So the doors were flung open and became our proscenium stage. And Alvin performed at Chinatown Door Jams, and performing Chinatown Beats with him that time was the late Jeff Lee. And that was the last time this song was performed, so we're really honored now to have Sean and Alvin perform it for us today.
See what I mean? From Chatham Square, we not only got a venue, we got a lead guitarist. Chatham Square Library is a full-service public library. Detective Jack U walks the Chinatown Beat, a red heart in blue. He is the soul of the street, knows every storefront, back alley, and all those middlemen. Understands loyalty, deception, and its consequence. Detective Jack U knows the deal in the store. He'll stand by you, in or outside of the law. He can't be bought, he can't be sold, though many have tried. He knows what people live for and why they die. Detective Jack, you got promoted uptown, but when trouble brews, he comes right back down. It's not the power, the glory, or even solving the case. It's all about community and saving face. Community, face, community, face. That's Detective Jack, you. Thank you. Now we're ready for Q&A.
I know there are a lot of burning questions here, so let's see. Anybody want to ask some embarrassing questions of Alvin?
More!
Don't be shy. He can handle it. Oh, Henry, you had a chance already, but go ahead.
How long does it take to do your hair?
Well, we got stuck in a lift today, so it took a while.
We can ask embarrassing questions of Henri also.
I just want to encourage you, since I performed in one of your plays, to keep on writing also non-Asian characters.
Were there any additions to the paperback? Were there any updates or things you threw in at the end for the paperback?
No, on the back side, but I guess a publishing secrets too. What they do a lot of sometimes, another publishing secrets, what they do is they take sometimes they just take some hardcovers and repurpose them too. So we got a few more blurbs on the back, so that was nice. So we got that from Alison Stewart, right? So there's that. But other versions, yeah, and it's also available here.
Anyone have any embarrassing stories about Alvin to tell? Anyone? Wow, I think we've answered everyone's questions. That's amazing.
Okay, so there are books here, and
There's one in the back, all right.
Hey, sorry, I find y'all's story really inspiring, like y'all's story is the same as my grandparents' story, my mother's story, like y'all are the one who figured out America, like y'all were the kids of the people who came here, your parents came here, you figured it out, and I'm just curious also as, we as your descendants, and also as artists, like, what do y'all want us to take from your stories? As we go forward and become more Americanized, or absorbed into whiteness, you know what I mean? Like, what do you want us to take from y'all's stories when we tell ours?
I know I guess if there's one, I guess the big takeaway is that we're all New Yorkers, we're all Americans. So I guess it's getting more and more complicated every day, every second. Really, what is an American? What does it mean to be an American? And I think as we all shape that world, that identity, I think it's hopefully we're all just adding to this conversation. And of course, like what we aspire to be, like all great art, and hopefully it asks even more questions than has quote unquote answers. So I think it's really how do we shape our American identity now? What do we hope to achieve on this short time that we're on this planet too?
And I think artistically there's an interesting point there, which is that, we grew up the same, but we kind of had a different approach or take. So you didn't learn Chinese, you pushed it away. But, I learned Chinese, and when I was dancing, I did traditional Chinese dance. And so for me, it was really like trying to know what my history was and to understand this history and culture and bridge that. And what I find really inspiring with younger generations is there's not that kind of embarrassment that we felt. I was embarrassed to speak Chinese in front of other people, but I learned it and I spoke it with my family. But then it became a mission for me to say, yeah, this is it, and you guys need to learn this. And so I feel like it's that kind of courage, and also trying to make sure that what you do gets out there, it gets understood. We tell our own stories ourselves, and we tell it to other people. And so that, you know, we gain a better understanding of each other. And I think that's really, really important. Back then, I mean, like, you were the only Chinese in the neighborhood, I was the only Chinese in the neighborhood, and like what I said earlier was like, we represented all of China.
And then we talk about, then writers like from Henry, he has a completely different perspective as he grew up in Chinatown. So that's a completely different perspective than us growing out in the outer boroughs.
Make being different cool. Patrick in the back.
Hey Alvin, I was wondering, for inspiring writers, what was the process like writing a memoir, especially with all the Asian American history in your head? Like, did you have a journal? Did you talk to people? Did you interview people to get to this process of the book? And last question is, what did your family think of the book?
Yeah, I was lucky. I didn't show it to any of my family before it came out. So, but they all read it. They all read it and really loved it. So I'm very happy about that. And again, the bulk of the narrative, it started as 2 stage pieces. So it was a very different approach to writing a memoir. So just for doing that, you would hit the usual, historical archives and interview some of my family, looking at a lot of historical sources, but also anecdotal sources too. So just trying to combine all that into our own narrative. So it became a very different approach, which again started as 2 stage pieces, and then became this book.
Yes, we have a question.
I just want to say that when Alvin was growing up in Flushing, we were his neighbors.
Yes.
So I know the whole family.
Yes.
Fantastic. And then we have one question there in the back.
Hi, Alvin. What was my question again?
Next.
Come back to me. I forgot my question.
Yeah, I grew up near Flushing, and in fact, my grandfather and my family had a restaurant on Canal Street when I was growing up, from the 30s to the 70s. It wasn't a Chinese restaurant. But I was taken by your mention of Dinkins' gorgeous Mosaic, and realized that it's a good place to be because I really benefited from my multicultural upbringing in Queens and Manhattan. And we're a few stores down from Chris Marte's office, who's our council member, who happens to be a fantastic guy. And I think that the way to get out of our fix now is with better leaders. I'm just wondering if there's somebody who you can bring to our attention who you think we should pay attention to.
Oh, this is a friendly organization. We won't talk about politics tonight. Later at the bar, we'll talk about the politics.
Okay, Ginny, remember her
I
question?
remembered my question. Your mother's lullaby. When did you record it, and how did you know to record
And
it?
that's actually a great question too. And also, it was lost until last summer. I was doing an event at the Hudson Park New York Public Library, another great library, and the sound designer from the 1994 production came, and I was like, remember we used the audio of my mother singing that lullaby. Do you by chance have it? He goes, I'll have to look. He lives upstate now. And I swear, he found the digital audio tape from the 90s in his laundry room. I couldn't find it in his laundry room. So I was so thankful he found that. And thankfully, he's a real archival audio artist. So he still has machines that play digital audio tape. So that's how we found it. And those who speak Toy Sign also. Yes, and those who speak Toy Sign, I want to apologize for my awful Toy Sign speaking.
It is kind of bad.
Pretty bad, bro.
And it was bad, not good bad. And at the end, we're all in showbiz. At the end, when she sings a lullaby, she said essentially, let's hear how it came out, and she wanted to do another take.
So you do get it genetically.
Yes. But I think she was more on key than I am, though.
We have an online question.
Online question.
Oh, yes, sorry, the online question.
Well, just one. For Michael, since you're both younger siblings and chose creative careers, do you think that the older siblings' upbringing and difficult work in their laundries led to a more rigid, judgmental outlook and discouraged from pursuits like yours?
Right, I think it's well. Thanks. I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. Thanks for people in Zoom land. Thank you so much for joining us too. And no, it wasn't. I think I'm the youngest of five. Where were you?
I'm also the youngest.
Oh wow!
So there might be something there.
Right. No, but I was lucky too. So my brother Henry, he was he got spanked for staying out too late, making too much noise first. So I was behind. I got to do that, and so it was amazing though too. Where even though and also a dirty state of laundry. We were so American by the time we came along. Like even though it's called the hand laundry, most of the laundry was sent out. So that was a dirty secret. So, but when my older siblings, they worked harder, but they never resented that. My older brothers and my sister, they worked very hard for that, and so they never resented that too. And I think it just became, and again, for better and for worse, I had a lot of freedom as a kid. Again, so that's it was never a question for you. Was it a question for you, like the older siblings?
I think as with any family, the youngest kids, your parents become more lenient because you're more experienced now. And I think what happens, the way I think about it is that my oldest siblings had different parents than I did, meaning that, you grow, but they grow too. They're not the same people 10 years later. So my oldest brother and oldest sister are at least 10 years older than I am because of the immigration history of the family. So they were born in China and Hong Kong, and then they came here, and then my parents had me and my other next sister. And I think as my parents were here longer, they became more lenient, they became more Americanized, and so the parents that raised my eldest brother and sister were not the same parents that raised me and my other sister, right? We always think of our parents as being one way, but no, they're human beings too. Believe it or not. Other questions? Right there?
Yeah, so my family had a laundry and house kitchen, and we've been exploring what that story is and how they got there. And I was wondering if you could share more about your families, and was it just opportunity of choosing, Flushing in the Bronx or even in Harlem for business?
Well, the laundry history is an interesting history. I mean, what Alvin was saying earlier about them being hand laundries, here on the East Coast, Chinese laundries didn't do the wash on site. And there's a labor history to that that has to do with steam laundries and factories and who could own the machinery and who could not. So a lot of Chinese were not allowed to own the machinery. So most of the Chinese laundries and the ones that Alvin's family had and I had were kind of like middlemen. So people would drop off the laundry, we would sort it, and then we would send it out to the factory where the machinery was to wash it. And then it would come back cleaned and pressed, and then our families would then sort it and put it in packages. They never actually did the laundry there, even though it's called the hand laundry.
And if you wanted a hand laundry, you had to pay extra. So in that way, we were very American.
But there's also like a whole system. So, my grandfather came here in 1903, and he worked in laundries. I found him in a laundry on 35th Street. I found him in one in New Haven, Connecticut. I found that he was in Maynard, Massachusetts. And so these laundries were like broad networks. And
my parents' first laundry was across the water in Hoboken, New Jersey.
And again, we forget that doing laundry back then was really onerous. Okay, it's not throwing it in a washer and then throwing it in the dryer. Back then, most people had to do the laundry by hand. And so most people sent out their wash. And so these laundries were actually quite lucrative businesses. And every neighborhood had a laundry. And so I actually have a laundry directory for New York from 1967. And I have a lot of friends who have grown up in laundry, and we've found them listed in there. Like we found your laundry listed in there. Henri?
There's a history behind the Chinese hand laundries in America. and that is that Chinese men were only allowed to do certain types of work. They were not allowed to do certain other types of work like policemen or firemen or any of those kind of trades. So
Right.
one of the things about starting a laundry was that it didn't cost too much as an initial investment, and you didn't have to speak that much English. And that's why you suddenly had this proliferation of Chinese hand laundries, mostly Chinese men doing these hand laundries.
Yeah, we haven't spoken at all about the Chinese Exclusion Act. So do people know about the Chinese Exclusion Act? Some, okay. But if you don't, I mean, it really, it is today, even to this day, the only law that was in the American law books that barred a specific nationality from citizenship and entry into the United States, with very few exceptions. And it was enacted in 1882. And it was enacted largely because they said the Chinese are taking away our jobs. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
So I would say that was the first, and God help us, may that be the last American law that does that.
Yeah, in 1902, it was only supposed to be for 10 years. In 1902, it was renewed for another 10 years, 1892, and then in 1903, it became permanent. And it was not repealed until 1942. So for 60 years, the population of Chinese in this country went down, like precipitously. And it was mostly Chinese men that came. And even when they repealed it in the 1940s, when they repealed it, they imposed a quota. And the quota was something like 105 Chinese per year.
Right.
And that quota was not lifted until the Hart-Celler Act in 1965.
65.
Yeah, when they did immigration reform. And it is then in 1965 when then more Chinese could come. But our ancestors, being very clever, they found a lot of different ways to come anyway. But in 1965 is when it came. And you know, even if they could come, the Chinese were barred from becoming citizens. And what Henry was talking about, you know, how the Chinese couldn't be policemen. So there were a lot of job categories back then that required you to be an American citizen. And some of them are like really bizarre, not just policemen, but like, you know, plumbers or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but there were a lot of jobs. Undertaker. You had to be a U.S. citizen to be an undertaker, and if the Chinese couldn't become citizens, they couldn't become an undertaker. So.
Yeah, I'm conflating this with my own working class Jewish American experience. I was wondering, you mentioned something earlier about Chinese weren't allowed to own machinery that did the laundry.
Yeah.
How did that work?
There were laws that you couldn't sell to someone who's not an American citizen. Yeah. Yes.
I read that the Chinese laundry men had organized themselves in 1910 to support Sun Yat-sen to provide them with financing to overthrow the Manchu government. The Chinese Laundrymen's Association.
Well, most of the Chinese around here were Chinese laundrymen. And yes, Sun Yat-sen came here to raise money for the revolution. And a lot of that money came from the Chinese laundrymen, who were like the majority of the immigrants here at that time. So yeah, no, that's absolutely true.
We write about that too, the Chinese Hand Laundry Alliance.
Yeah.
They were really, that's one of the first labor actions for Chinese in New York City, too, for Asian Americans too, in the first labor actions back in 1933.
There was a strike.
It was a protest actually, which was, I think the city was going to, I mean, don't hold me to this. The city was going to impose some sort of a fee, like a licensing fee. And it was quite exorbitant for Chinese laundries. So the Chinese laundrymen went to the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association, and they said, we have to fight this. And then Chinese Benevolent Association said, okay, each of you laundrymen give me like $2, and then we're gonna hire a lawyer and fight it for you. And then, you know, there was some dispute over it. The lawyer did a good job. I think they lost, and then the laundrymen started the Chinese Hand Laundrymen's Association, and they did it themselves. Yeah, so, yeah, but the laundrymen were the majority of the people here, and they had, you know, the economic power. Chinatown itself in Manhattan was thriving and prosperous because of the Chinese laundrymen, who were in far-flung places the rest of the week. and Chinatown was very quiet. And then on the weekends, they would all come in to get their supplies. And that was really the main economy of Chinatown, were these Chinese laundrymen coming from far-flung places and coming on the weekends, buying things, going to the family association, gambling. So we'll have one or two more questions, if anybody in the back there.
Thank you for mentioning it's an amazing biography. There's some amazing family history. I think many other people in the room do as well. And thank you also for mentioning the Chinese Slave Act. It said something that it wasn't until 1943, at the height of World War II, when technically China was an ally of the United States. So that only then did they say we'll start repealing the Chinese Exclusion Act. And it wasn't until, as you mentioned, the Hart-Celler Act 1965 that really gave full citizenship and allowed for more immigration to come into Chinatown and such. I think that's very revealing what the circumstances that talk. Otherwise, one wonder how much longer the Exclusion Act would have lasted. But I guess growing up, with that kind of history, the idea of families ever talk about the Chinese Hand-Culture Alliance or the Exclusion Act, or maybe a family in China who could not come over here because of the Exclusion Act and everything, was that ever part of the conversation growing up? Was it more something you learned, like maybe in high school or beyond? Because so much Asian American history doesn't get taught until you start getting into college and so on.
We're also right about it. I knew we couldn't get our grandmother into the country till a certain age too. So so I just knew there was, as a child, I knew that was a concept, but I didn't know all the laws yet or anything too. And you're right, there was no Asian American history taught then.
Yeah, I think we all had to find that on our own. Question?
Could you remind us, I know you talked about it in the book, about the relationship between mother and father and why it's so long for your mothers to come?
Well, yeah, they had an arranged marriage, and like a lot of people, my father came over illegally, and he worked in Chinatown restaurants, and then he came, by our poor village standards, he became a rich man, so he went back to China, and a marriage was arranged. Then he came back to New York City, and my mother didn't hear from him for 10 years. It's funny, at least I always see my parents in rose-colored glasses. When I tell people the story, a lot of people automatically say, you must have brothers and sisters you don't know about. But I can safely say both of their females, there were no traumatic entrances. But also I think because he had access to his laundry and the laundry capital through village connections, my mother could come and track him down, and she tracked him down in Hoboken, New Jersey. That's how that story came about. So I talk about that later on. So it's very, and it was very different growing up in an arranged marriage to a family with an arranged marriage.
Well, thank you so much, Alvin, and thank you everyone for coming today. I want to invite everybody to remember you can get the book here. Alvin will sign your book for you. There are some refreshments outside, and thank you all again for being with us. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.